Why do they talk about the power of being in the present moment, power of now, huh? Because that's where the gold is.
Hello and welcome to the Lost and Found podcast. This is a conversation about being human and that peace of mind is closer than we think. And today it's an absolute privilege to have Bill Petitt. Thank you so much for being here, Bill.
It's a pleasure. It's my honor. Yeah.
Um, I've been someone that in coming across the principles, I've watched quite a lot of different videos of different people, and I suppose, and you'll know yourself, but there's certain people that when they're sharing, you can hear something, and other people maybe not so. And there's been many videos of yourself, many podcasts that I've listened to, and um, yeah, they're just amazing. So
Mm,
thank you so much for everything you've done so far, Bill.
mm, thank you.
Would you be able to just share a little bit about yourself in terms of your background, and then what life was like before you came across the principles?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and I'll try to make this somewhat concise. An Irishman isn't usually very good at that, but and I'm not either. But I'll do my best. Feel free to cut me off. I was born in the Midwest of the United States. I was the second oldest of six children, three boys and three girls. We were raised Irish cat. We were raised Catholic. My dad was from an Irish Catholic community up in Northwest Iowa, and frankly, as I was growing up, I was as a youngster, I was as a young kid, I was pretty mischievous, I guess. I think they would have probably called me oppositional defiant disorder these days. And the treatment, I was born in 1942, and the treatment in 49 and 50 for oppositional defiant disorder, the treatment plan was pretty simple. It was wait till your father gets home.
Yeah.
And so I experienced a lot of that. And I held that against my father for years, but I realized at one point that because they believed in a punishing, judging and punishing God who had created a hell, they were really bent on doing whatever they could not to have their children go there. And if that meant spanking the hell out of them three or four times a week
Yeah.
to get the devil out of them, then that was what you did. And I was able to see the innocence and the beauty in that he really meant it when he said, "This hurts me more than it does you." So then about sixth grade, I became a student, and I was a good student in a small Catholic high school, and I graduated, but I think I was still fearful of this punishing God that you could go to hell. I was taught you could go to hell for eating a hot dog on a Friday back then. So I went to the seminary. I thought, well, maybe that's one place that my sexuality and my aggressive tendencies maybe will be under control. So I was going to go to the Trappist monastery. I don't know if you know what that is, where
No, no.
they pray 7 days, seven times a day. They go to sleep at 7:30. They sleep on straw cots. They don't talk any more than they have to. And I was going to spend my life there. And for the first time ever, after 2 years in the seminary, they did psychological testing. And the testing came back 5 weeks before I was going. They had the testing for months, but I think he was reluctant because he really liked me, the abbot. It said there is no way that this young man could tolerate being cooped up in your monastery. And then it said number two, there's no way that your monastery could tolerate having this young man cooped up in your monastery. So I worked for a year in a factory, and I boxed golden gloves, and then I got decided I wanted to be a doctor, and I went back to college and went to medical school, and was 2 years I was a general surgeon, 36 hours on, 40 out of every 48, and twice a month we were on for 96 out of 108 hours awake most of the time.
Wow.
Amazing. And I couldn't I got Daniel where I wasn't nice to people. I really wasn't. And I don't think I was ever not nice to my patients, but I wasn't nice to the nurses. I wasn't nice to the colleagues. I was exhausted. And so I gave them 6 months notice and finished up my 2 years, and I was drafted into the Vietnam War and I went and did 6 months extra training as a what they call a Navy flight surgeon, which means you're a doctor for a squadron of pilots, the Navy pilots.
Mm.
And I did that for 3 years. I was a family doctor. And and then I was then I went into psychiatry because two things. I wanted to find peace of mind, and I also started to see very clearly the relationship between our state of mind and our physical being. So that when we got stressed, we got sick in
Mm.
one way or another. I started to see that, and I was curious about learning that at a deeper and deeper level. So I did 3 years in the Navy as a psychiatry resident. And then I was chief of psychiatry at a nuclear submarine base in Groton, New London, Connecticut. I went out on a submarine for 3 days. I was on an aircraft carrier for 3 days as a flight surgeon. Had a lot of neat experiences. And but I was going in and out of depression. I was not a good husband, and even though we had two little kids, and it ended up being divorced from my wife. And I felt like a failure, and I really felt like a failure. And I was exposed to a thing at the time called the LifeSpring. It's familiar with some people are familiar with EST and the Landmark program. And it wasn't the level of the principles, but this was 1980, and it helped me at least let go of some of my guilt and self-punishment and allowed me to get in my life a little more of the time. And I left the Navy, even though had been selected very quickly up in ranks and probably would have done very well. Um, and I went to California from Connecticut, and I took a job teaching in a program called LifeSpring, which is 5 days, very intensive programs where I rose to be national program director for that company. And I would travel out to the East Coast once a month to do a program in New York or Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. And then I would spend a week with my two small children that I kept in touch with as best as I could. And it was during that time that I heard about a man named George Pransky, who I suspect you've heard of,
Yeah.
that he was helping people over in Oakland, California. He was helping people that most people had given up on. And more often than not, he was able to bring them back to a state of well-being, way beyond what they'd ever experienced. And it ended up, George and I, and make a long story short, we got together and we had a couple of a flood one time and something else. We've had to keep rescheduling, but we did meet for 2 hours in March of 1983. And he told me about this man named Sidney Banks that had an experience in 1973, which is 53 years ago now, and that he had met either in 76 or 78, either 3 or 5 years after that, and that this man who had only a ninth grade education had had a direct experience of God and had taught him how, and his wife, he'd been struggling with his marriage and his personal life with tremendous anxiety, and that it had really changed his life and tremendously. And so he said he's coming to San Francisco from British Columbia, and he's going to do a program on Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, by this time, I had been going in and out of depression for 20 years. I'd seen six different psychiatrists. I'd been on medicine a couple of times. It never seemed to really help. So I wasn't on medicine, and it never stopped me from continuing my education or continuing my work. But I probably went through medical school metaphorically on two and a half cylinders out of eight,
Mm.
and then wondered why it was hard.
Yeah.
I, so I was determined. I'm a, gu- I'm a gutsy guy, and I made it through, and I was still making it through, and I was I was national program director for this company. And I sat in front of Mr. Banks in April 1st, April Fool's Day. We're coming up to my 43rd anniversary.
Yeah.
April Fool's Day, 1983. Up on the stage in a big soft chair is a fellow who was born, as you know, in Scotland to illegitimately to a teenage girl and adopted to a poor family, and had a ninth grade education, formal education, had been a welder for 14 years and had read two books since his ninth grade education, two welding books in order to become a master welder. And within 30 minutes, Daniel, within 30 minutes, I felt 300 pounds of pressure come off of my chest. I didn't know why or how initially. And I knew that my days of going in and out of clinical depression were gone, were over. And I can tell if we want later, I had one bout that lasted 6 weeks, about 12 years later, but we can go into that. What I learned from that. I really believe that what's behind life is unconditional love.
Yeah.
And things do not happen to us, they happen for us. And then often I'm a co-creator in creating what I need to give me an opportunity to learn more about love and how to be in my life rather than in my thoughts more of the time. So on April Fool's Day, 1983, I started a journey which I've been on for almost 43 years now. Of I hear some people say they teach the principles. I know words are just words, but I don't think you can teach the principles. First of all, even the definition of a principle that and please feel free to stop me at any time.
Yeah.
Mr. Banks said a principle, the way I'm talking about them, the way I'm defining a principle, is a spiritual source before form.
Mm.
Pardon me? A spiritual source before form. So he's trying to say this is not like the five principles of woodcutting or the five principles of to running a 26-mile marathon. No, these are not of this world. This is a metaphor. He said, please, so many people end up thinking this is a thing, the three principles. It's not, it's a metaphor that was gifted to me after I had this direct experience of God. And I started to cry because I was so overwhelmed with love and gratitude. And this was gifted to me as a way to as a means to explain the connection between our spiritual nature, our formless nature, where there's a spiritual wisdom beyond the intellect at the core of our being, and our psychological and our physical nature.
Yeah.
And that's what they are. And I hear a lot of people, and I know I could sound arrogant or whatever, judgmental. I don't, but I think there's a lot of emphasis at times in the principles that your thoughts are creating your experience. And that's true, either consciously or unconsciously. And we can talk about unconscious thought and what you do with feelings that come from not unconscious thought. But that's just but that's but if you don't know, once you know that there's a spiritual wisdom beyond your intellect, which Jack Pransky and Tom Kelly, who've done so many of the research papers, and I'm privileged to have joined them the last few years, it showed that understanding that you had a spiritual wisdom beyond the intellect was even more important than understanding that your thinking created your experience.
Yeah.
They in the statistical thing they called innate health was their way of pointing to an understanding that we are spiritual beings gifted with divine universal wisdom with guiding us every moment of our life.
Mm.
And why we would think the coyote and the whale and the lemon tree and everything else in life would have that and that we wouldn't is beyond my recognition.
Yeah. No,
So,
thanks. Thank you for that, Bill. And I know that's condensed because, like I say, I have listened to some of your previous talks, and I know you are Irish and good at talking. So, I, because I mentioned that, I just wanted to share that, and it'll lead me into a question. And it's I was once on a walk near my house, and I was listening to one of your talks,
Mm,
and it was something around peace of mind and how we are all the same. And someone asked a question, and it was so this doesn't have anything to do with my level of deservingness. And
mm,
and you said, no, you're making all that up.
mm,
And you said, get off being special.
mm.
And I remember that so vividly because that's it was true for me as well. Like at some level, I thought I was different and special. Could you talk to that, Bill, in the sense of what you were meaning by, you know, we're all the same?
Yeah, 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 I can, Daniel. I think what you've spoken to are some really profound things, and they're at the core. They're at the core of what Sid was trying to teach us. I mean, I recently, as part of a 54-hour program that I just finished, um, do you know Billy Mann?
No, I'm not sure of Billy Man.
Billy's from Ireland. You'd love him. I got a feeling that you and he would really connect. But Billy was in it. I had 28 people from 12 different countries. I had three women, beautiful women in hijabs, from Muslims and people from every culture and religion. And you really see that you can't help but when you listen, your heart gets full. I spent 2 hours yesterday with a man named Harry Durbinski. This is my fifth or sixth thing I do on every fourth Wednesday. He's doing work, and Dick and Bettinger is active in this too. He's doing work in the refugee camps in Africa, in Uganda. And so there was two refugee camps there. And for 2 hours, I spoke one or two sentences, and then either Daniel or Emmanuel translated into Swahili.
Mm,
Now, this may sound self-serving, but I gave a little donation every time I speak at the end of the month, and it allows them to offer these people food. Sometimes they haven't eaten for 2 days,
mm,
so they get to come and get some food for their body and food for their soul at the same time. And I think of the thing in The Missing Link where Sid says some people think that God is on the inside and then the body is on the outside. And he said, I'm here to tell you they're the same thing in a different disguise. It can't be anything that isn't God energy. Now, even David Bohm, have you seen that article from the lady, the physics lady in Spain, in Sweden? She's 51 years old, named Maria Strom. And she's written an article. She's been writing articles in physics since 1995. So 30 years. She's 55 years old or 51 years old or something like that. She was the youngest person, not just woman, youngest person ever to become the chairman of a physics department at a major university in Sweden. Have you seen the article?
no, no, I've not seen it, Bill. No.
Would you like me to send the link?
Yeah, that'd be
Make a
great. Yeah.
note? Okay, link. Um, so the reason I'm saying this, here's this woman, and she's getting flack from, I guess, from some people in her company in physics. She says that the three universal principles, as explained by Sydney Banks, are the bridge between quantum physics and Sufism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. It's the bridge between the formless and the form,
Mm.
between what David Bohm calls the implicate order and the explicate order, the quantum physicist. But here's what probably you were pointing to earlier on page 6 of the missing link. And oh, I have read the Enlightened Gardener and the I'd read the Enlightened Gardener, I think 16 times. This was my 17th time doing this 54-hour course. We went through all six of Sid's books, right? And I don't know if you've ever heard me speak about the 15th time I read the book,
I have,
I
yeah,
finally
yeah,
slowed down to where I saw the note to the reader, right?
yeah.
So I've been touched by the power of stillness. That doesn't mean that we don't be doing, I can be creating something incredible and be in still inside. That's what that there's a metaphor that I use, Daniel, that I say, have you heard me talk about the bank robber from the United States,
I'm not
Willie
sure
Sutton?
if I have now.
Well, in the 1950s, there was a bank robber. His name was Willie Sutton. And I was a young teenager and read about he robbed banks. He was really a good bank robber. But he'd eventually get caught, and there's a reason for this. They'd put him in prison, but he was really good at escaping. He escaped from prison 3 or 4 times, and then he'd start robbing banks again, and then he'd finally get caught, and they'd put him back in prison. So the second or third time, somebody at one of the major newspapers got permission to interview him, and they said, "Mr. Sutton, why do you keep robbing banks?" And he said, "Because that's where they keep the money." Now, why does Sydney Banks, Eckhart Tolle, David Hawkins, you name the person, why do they talk about the power, Steve Hardison, why do they talk about the power of being in the present moment, power of now? Huh? Because that's where the gold is. My late wife, you've heard me say this, she one time early in 1985, she said, "Oh my gosh, this is really simple, isn't it?" This is 41 years ago. And I was not making it simple, Daniel. I'm sure you've never done this, but I got into trying to figure it out. And I said, "What do you mean simple, honey?" And she said, "Well, every person that ever walked this earth, their entire life they were on earth was one of two places. They were in their thoughts or they were in their life. Only two places there are." Now, it doesn't mean that if you watch children and they're playing, they're in their life. Doesn't mean they're not thinking, but they're not in their thoughts.
Mm.
I hear some people say, "I want to just stop thinking." I said, "No, you don't. That's when they turn the machine off, you know." You don't want that. But you want to have a relationship with this divine gift of thought that's healthy, so you don't hurt yourself with the gift. One of the things that I've seen very clearly is that if you understand any system, have you heard me talk about that recently?
Mm.
If you understand any system sufficiently, whether it's gravity, whether it's electricity, whether it's finance, whether it's real estate law, whatever it is, four things occur naturally. Like and gravity and having gone to the Grand Canyon that you mentioned, if you take a 4-year-old to the Grand Canyon, especially one that's pretty hyperactive, you either hold on to them really, really tight, or you put them in a halter where you've got complete control over them.
Yeah.
Because why? But why, Daniel?
because they're likely to not be aware and just run off the edge.
They don't understand gravity. That's why they need a sippy cup. You and I don't need a sippy cup. After we take our drink, 100% of the time, we put it back on something solid.
Mm.
If I was forced to become an electrician tomorrow, but somebody invaded our country and said, regardless, you've got enough education, you're a electrician starting tomorrow. My life expectancy would be in hours because I don't understand electricity. Four things, if you understand any system sufficiently, including if you really, the more you understand what the spiritual truth that the three principles are pointing to, the connection between your spiritual nature and your psychological and physical nature. Number one, it brings simplicity to complexity, to apparent complexity. Any system, once you understand it. To an electrician, uh, electricity is really simple. Okay. Number two, it brings safety. You're very unlikely, if you really understand any system, you're really unlikely to either harm yourself or anyone else with that system. Number three, it brings efficient use of that system. You're able to utilize that system. The Romans understood gravity so much that they at times were able to, with aqueducts and understanding gravity, they were sending water 300 and 400 miles from its source because they understood gravity at a deep level. And predictability. Things you're not wondering how things are going to how things are going to occur
Mm.
because you understand the system.
Yeah.
So here's what, and I know you've heard this quote, but the divine passes from the formless to the form. And as human beings, we are both spectators and participants in this spiritual theater called life. You don't hear it. To me, this is the essence of what Sid was talking about. Everything that you see around you and around me is made of atoms. True?
Yeah.
Everything. And the physicists tell us that inside every one of those atoms, there are electrons going 3/4 the speed of light. Something's doing that, Daniel. You don't have to call it, for me, I know some religions, they'd say, oh, it's sacrilegious to call. No, you can call it anything you want, as far as I'm concerned. You can call it Curly, Moe, Larry. The label has nothing to do with it. It's just acknowledging that there is a powerful source. Now, what Sid saw, the principles spoke to the nature of that power, which was unconditional love, not judgment and punishment. And the attributes is that it's omni-intelligent, universal mind, it's omni-conscious, universal consciousness, and it's omni-creative, universal thought. That's what's keeping everything in existence right now, whatever God is. That's what's created all the galaxies, the billions of stars, the dark energy, everything. It's everything that in the explicate order is a manifestation of that which is the implicate or infinite order.
Mm.
The great mystics and we as human beings, the difference between us and the whale and that goes down and has its babies and comes back with a different song every year, but they've all got the same song. The difference between us and the animals and everything else in life is that we have the same love-based wisdom within our consciousness, or we have a wisdom-based guidance system. But unlike the whale and unlike the flowers and unlike the lemon tree, we can override it with our personal thinking. And being a spectator, we can become aware that that's what we are. Sid says, once you realize that you are what you seek, that you're not separate from God. You're a manifestation of God.
Mm.
Once you realize that, you can't have any fear any longer. You can't, you might start to create fear, but you know who's creating the fear. They're in the same underbridge you're in. So all suffering is a manifestation of a mistaken identity, identifying ourselves with our brain and our body that we were given to go through life. This Sid initially years ago, if you find some of his old audio tapes, he talked freely about reincarnation.
Yeah.
But some people got offended, so he didn't. He said, "I don't want to offend people." But I don't believe or disbelieve, but it makes sense to me. Some people seem like this is their first time here. I feel like it might be my first time. I've got a brother who's an old soul. He seemed to know to walk around the hole, not fall in it four
Yeah.
times before,
Yeah.
and you've heard me say that. Well, the great mystics of the world who tried to explain such knowledge had no choice but to speak in metaphors, knowing their words were only a representation of the spiritual wisdom that lies within the consciousness of all human beings. Not most, not except those people that are in the state mental hospitals. No, 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 no. All human beings. Only to the degree of the individual's psychological, all human psyches are rooted in the same universal truth. No person's psyche is better than any others, and only to the degree of the individual's psychological and spiritual understanding does it appear to vary. And in that thing that the spiritual wisdom lies within the consciousness of all human beings, I think it's one of the cases that's actually in Hannah Studley's Beyond Diagnosis. You've read
Yeah.
that book, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask Bill, so like, um, and it kind of links into what you just shared there. Um, so what what I'm wanting to do it like on this podcast is kind of point to where and how people get lost. And I know you share a lot about there being one cause and one cure. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. In the fall, I'm coming to Europe, as you know, and doing 9 different programs. And I've even thought of contacting all the people and sending out. Have you ever seen the thing that I created called the Patsy, the Pettit attachment to thought content?
No, I've
Uh,
not seen that.
well, I tell you, it's really practical. And what I hear you, Dan, saying, can we bring this to practicality? And I think I can. And you can imagine somebody that you might see. You don't have to imagine yourself, but I'll tell you what's on the Patsy. In 1990s, now I already 94, 95, I'd already been exposed 12 years to the principles, right? And exploring them. I think all we can do is I'm a student of the principles and I'm a sharer of the principles.
Hmm.
Now, what I share is different than I did 25 years ago because I've seen more.
Yeah.
We were talking from very early on. It's incremental, and I'm a slow learner. I tell people I make up for it by being a fast forgetter, but no. But so we learn incrementally. Sid used to say there's an infinite number of doors of understanding what these principles are pointing to. That's a really big number, right? So I kind of reflected in 19 mid early 1990s and mid 1990s, what is it that takes people away from this natural state, right? And I thought, well, obviously it's a misuse of this beautiful divine gift called thought and it's a lack of sufficient understanding, and a lack of sufficient understanding then leads to misuse, right? Okay. So so I thought, how do I get a student when they come in and they're suffering? So how do I get a student? Okay. So first of all, you love people. You just get present with them and you listen. And then there's a misunderstanding too that you don't listen to their story. If it's important to the person to have their story heard by somebody, what they've gone through, boy, like Sid says, you listen like a good neighbor. You know that's not where the answer is, but you listen with love in your heart and presence so that that person can know that you care, because people do not care what you know till they know that you care. And not only that, if you listen with an open heart, with presence, you will see where to turn the key. You'll see what they know and what they don't know. So you're not just saying, let me tell you about these three principles, which I did in 1983 and four or five. No, you listen and you see what they see this, but they don't see that. Okay.
Mm.
So here's what I say to people. I say, in my experience, there's about six different ways. There's an infinite number of ways we can use thought and misuse thought, but there's six pretty frequent ways. And I'm going to ask you to rate yourself 0 to 5. Zero means, oh, when those thoughts, I just wave to them and let them go through my mind. 5 would be I get so tangled up in that kind of thought that before I know it, I'm have really struggling. It really impacts my life. So 0 to 5. Okay, are you with me?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can even in your mind think of yourself or think of one of your clients that you've helped. So my first one is worry. Have you heard me talk? So I say worry, getting caught up in the what ifs, 0 to 5. So give me think of somebody that you've seen that you came. Give me a number.
Oh,
Getting caught up in what ifs.
a good 4.
4. Okay. And then I teach while I do it, Dan. I say, see, I say, people say rabbits really multiply really fast. But I'll tell you what. I'll put two what ifs against any two rabbits in the world. Because if I got two rabbits, male and female, right time, everything, I put them in a room and I come back 10 minutes later, there may be something started, but there's only going to be two rabbits walking around.
Mm.
If I took two what ifs in my head and I let them commingle for 10 minutes, I sometimes ask how, and people say I got hundreds of those little suckers running around. Because each one has five progeny every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, what is 4? So guilt, to what degree do you still in judgment of yourself for your mistakes? And you talked about self-love. You haven't seen your psychological innocence. You're not in total love of yourself. You're still in judgment. To what degree are you still in judgment, feeling guilt, some shame? So
3.
what, 3, okay. On the other side, how much resentment are you still holding on to? Even if you've tried to let go and forgive, and that you realize because of there's some people that have said or did some certain thing that you're still in, how much do you still caught up in resentment?
3.
Great. How much do you get up, to what degree, we'll call him this person Joey. Joey, to what degree does Joey get upset when things aren't the way Joey wants them to be? Not just
Oh,
for a few seconds, but I mean, has really trouble. Yeah, okay, 4. Okay. To what degree does Joey over analyze? And when I say overanalyze, keep going. I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure this out, even though they're getting more into confusion and more into, their mood going down and the tension going up. What 4 did you say?
I think it's a 4, yeah, for Joey.
Okay. Overanalyze. And to what degree is there unresolved grief from losses in one's life? It could be a grandparent, it could be a relationship, it could be
Yeah,
finance. To what degree have you not come to peace with some losses that you've had in your life?
a 3.
3. And sometimes I've added on, that's the 6, but sometimes for some people, I've added on, to what degree have you been driven in your life? Do you feel like we're either guided by this spiritual wisdom beyond the intellect, or we're driven to try to prove ourselves or to prove our worthiness, or to what degree do you feel that you're, rather than being guided by wisdom, you're driven by your need to prove?
I think that can be quite high as well. So four.
Four, okay. And the last one would be, and they're all related, but to what degree do you feel that fear drive, is controlling you? That you either, for me, it was is fear of success as much as fear of failure.
Mm.
But so, what degree fear?
A three.
Three. Okay, so we've got a bunch of threes and fours. So then I say, to Joey, how many hours a day in the last 2 weeks have you been awake or asleep? What's your average over 2 weeks? Would your average sleep?
7 hours a day, roughly. So
Okay, 17 hours awake. Of the 17 hours awake, how many of them have you been in some form of stressful thinking, worry, guilt, resentment, upset, overanalysis, unresolved grief?
uh, maybe 10.
10 hours. Okay. Now, as soon as Joey tells me that, I've got a student, Dan, because I can now tell them and give them a really brief course on the physiology of mental well-being, that we there's a process in our bodies called the stress response. Most people have heard of that, right? The fight or flight response.
Yeah.
Okay, it's some people know the science, some people don't. The wonderful book, he's really brilliant at ex making complex things simple, is the Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Have you ever heard of that book?
I have, yeah.
Robert Sapolsky, yeah, it's really good. And he talks about the hypothalamic pituitary axis and how that re and it's meant for our ancestors to face a saber-toothed tiger with nothing but a big wooden club. Okay. And I say, because they left their AR-15 back at the cave and they just weren't thinking, they only, but no. So all they've got is a big wooden club and they're facing a saber-toothed tiger. Their only chances of survival are massive amounts of noradrenaline, adrenaline, glucose with superhuman strength to maybe stun the tiger and get to the cave, right? I had a nephew. If I don't know if you've heard the story. Linda's nephew was standing right by his dad as he was working under the car. The jack gave way and came down on his chest. The car. He immediately grabbed. He's 5'2", 130 pounds, eighth grade, and lifted up the car and screamed, and the neighbor came out, and he held that car until the neighbor pulled his dad out with minor injuries, and
Well,
then he put the car down. He's never been able to lift that car since, and he's much bigger and much stronger.
mm,
There was a lady in Florida that actually they had alligators. They still do in some places, have alligators in the water holes on the golf courses. And she had two kids, and one of them got distracted. The other one fell in the water. She looks in, and the alligator head, it's in its mouth. She jumps in, slams her fist as hard as she could on top of the alligator's nose. He opened its mouth. She grabbed the kid. She got out. Why? Because of this response.
mm.
Okay. Now, here's the problem. It's meant to be activated up to 30 minutes every 24 hours. You can face a saber-toothed tiger every 30 minutes of every 24 hours, and your body won't suffer from it if you survive, because of you're activating this thing. 10 hours would be 20 times that, be 600, right? 10 hours would be 600 minutes. So you're activating a stress response with massive amounts of glucose, massive amounts of noradrenaline, adrenaline, okay? And you're creating, and how does the body let you know? Well, they there's 18% in the United States. There's a man named Corey Keyes. 18% are thriving, 50% are okay but stressed as long as they do their hour of exercise, an hour of mindfulness, an hour of yoga, an hour of Tai Chi. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm a little stressed, but I'm fine. And then 32% are waking up every day overwhelmed, languishing. 32%. And the bottom part of that 32% are waking up every day, Dan, deciding whether or not to kill themselves. And a subset of them are deciding how many people they're going to kill before they kill themselves or have somebody kill them. It makes you understand what's happening in the world. Sid tries to say that you can, if you have intelligence without wisdom, without understanding, you've got chaos.
Yeah.
So now and I'll tell you, I had a person that was referred to me yesterday, and before she saw the principles, she was spending about 10 hours a day, just like Joey, activating the stress response. Since she's been exposed to the principles, it's down now to about 5 hours. So I said, you have a tremendous amount to be grateful for. You've 50%, but you're still 10, what, 300, you're still 10 times over. You're still at 300 minutes. So your level of understanding is still such that it's wonderful. You've moved 50% now, more understanding of the principles.
Yeah.
So that to me, that I when people see that, they go, "Holy shit. Yeah, I'm doing this to myself, aren't I?" I
Mm.
say, "Yeah, but if you can see it, no guilt, there's no shoulds. It's about it's just about understanding the system. It's going to be effortless.
Mm.
Anytime you get a new level of understanding, and direction is the key. It's not the speed, it's the direction.
Yeah.
You're going in the right direction. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that's helpful or
No.
not.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The direction is the key. The direction back home. And I think something we talk about on the Lost and Found podcast is how understanding brings you home. And I've got a book here, Bill, um, one that I purchased. I don't know if you've seen this before.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Coming Home. And
Yeah.
what's funny, Bill, is you shared What a Day, Any Day a few years ago uh,
Mm,
on a
mm,
talk that I heard. And I heard that and I were laughing because, you know, surrounded by the walls, just a thought thick.
yeah. Think
And
about it.
where this messed me up is that I I actually showed my wife the poem. And so then whenever I'm caught up in my thinking, she's like, "What a day, any day," you know. And I can't get away with being in a bad mood anymore.
Well, even Sid says, listen, my wife, Barbara, she reminds me.
Yeah.
What, Sid, do you remember what you teach?
And one thing I read it, I picked this up today because I knew I was coming on here, and
Sure,
I read this. This is, I think it's the first one of the first pages, and it says, I'm just going to read the sentence. It says,
sure.
I began to realize that the only thing that takes me away from a peaceful life is traveling in my own thoughts.
And the key, to me, the key word there is began.
Yeah.
She's not saying I saw the whole thing, but I started to realize I got turned in the right direction, Dan.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I I began to realize that
Yeah.
that's where the hope is. That's what awakens hope.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I read that, it kind of points to that traveling in your own thoughts is taking you away from the peaceful life, alluding
Absolutely.
to that it's already there.
It's already there.
Yeah.
It's the default setting. You've heard me use the metaphor of a cork.
Mm.
Our mental well-being is like a cork. Its home is on the surface of the water.
Yeah.
You and I could push a pretty big cork under the water, and you're strong, much stronger than I, but you could hold it there quite a bit, but our shoulders would start to ache.
Mm,
We'd start to get signals that this is not a wise thing to do. And as soon as we let go of the cork would not need a GPS to get back to the surface.
yeah,
It's home, it would be going home. And if we can just see that is our innate state,
yeah,
and all we have to do is to get as present as we can. As soon as we notice that we've lost a feeling of love and lightheartedness, any thinking we do in that state it's not gonna work out well.
mm,
We've got one job at that point is to get present as best as we can. And that entails leaving our thinking alone, but we don't have to leave our thinking, do anything with our thinking so we can get present. The key is to just get present as best as we can, and
mm,
our attention away from our thinking will fall away.
yeah. And I'm guessing that you've had, many experiences where you've spoke with people whilst they are, lost in their thinking, lost in the feelings that they're experiencing, and they're not able to hear what you're saying. When what you just said there about leaving your thinking alone. What would you do, Bill, in those instances where people they can't quite hear what you're saying?
I would stop talking and I would listen, and I would be with them in a place of love. Because when you do that, when you're just there with a loving feeling and you're not trying to change anybody, you're just trying to you're loving them. They can hear themselves. They'll stop themselves. They say, "This is crazy. I'm arguing for my misery, aren't I?"
Mm, yeah.
And I say, I've never seen a person die that wanted to die being righteously miserable.
Mm,
And the other thing, Dan, that you've probably heard me say is that all apparent resistance is one thing. Do you remember what I said it is?
holding on, right?
It's lack of hope. All resistance. You hear when somebody says, "Oh, I don't think that person wants to they don't want to get well.
Mm,
They don't want to feel better." No, no, no. Wrong. Wrong answer. Like Sid says, every single human being on earth, whether they know it or not, is seeking enlightenment.
yeah.
Enlightenment's not a big nut. It's recognizing that you are what you seek, that you're divine energy in a form, period. That's what enlightenment is. And nobody's going to know that on this side of the veil 100% of the time. But there's a hell of a lot of difference between 20/80 and 80/20.
Mm,
Nobody's going to be in their life 100% of the time and not in their thoughts. But there's a hell of a difference between 20/80 and 80/20,
yeah.
or 85/15, or 86, 87, 88, 89, 90.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm urged to share is not urged, but that comes to me is, have you ever heard me talk about, well, I feel like I'm cutting you off a little bit. I wanted to go to gratitude a little bit.
Yeah, no, that'd be good, Bill. And I think that the only thing that will come into mind there a bit for me, and it might fit into gratitude, is when I heard you talk a few years ago, 3 years ago now at Leeds. I think around that time you'd I think you had the insight of these feelings being love letters,
Mm,
and there being
mm,
signs of the signs of something different to what people might think. Because in my experience, when people share um, that they feel anxious, they get scared of the feeling.
right, right. Instead of seeing that anxiety is a gift, it's it's summoning me to the stillness of the present. It's summoning me to the where the gold is. It's as best as I can. Because when I've either got two choices, when I feel my mood going down or my anxiety going up, I either try to do something with my thinking. You're trying to do something with your thinking that's gotten you in trouble already. It's not going to get better. So if again, it goes back to what we talked about, Daniel, it's understanding the system.
Mm.
If you understand the system that, Sid says seriousness and discomfort is to mental illness as damp and dark is to fungus, makes it grow. Now, I suspect I'm not the only one, Dan, that grew up thinking seriousness and discomfort shows you're a responsible person. And I was taught in a way to value being serious and a little bit of discomfort. It shows that you're being responsible.
Mm.
Bullshit. Shows that you don't understand the system. And then he says, love and lightheartedness is to mental illness as sunlight and dry is to fungus. It eradicates it. I had a wonderful, beautiful, one of these beautiful Muslim ladies on the course, just a beautiful lady. She said, Doctor, and we were just sharing and stuff. She says, I want you to know that I quote you. I'm a teacher too. I have students. And she said, I got kind of serious one day in class, and one of the little kids in my class held up his hand and he says, Teacher, he said, remember what Dr. Pettit says, if we haven't had a hearty laugh by noon, we're taking life way too seriously. And she said, Thank you, Joey. You reminded me. And she got back into a light. And it doesn't mean that you don't deal with things. But dealing with things from a loving, lighthearted state of mind, you're accessing wisdom as you do it. If you're doing it from fear or anxiety, you're just gonna go further down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
100% of the time.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, Bill, who might think, you know, uh, leaving your thinking alone is a good idea, and that letting go is something else that they need to do. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's where it's been an evolution for me, Dan, because I think if you listen to me 10 years ago, I would talk about leaving your thinking alone.
Mm.
I don't now, if I'm aware that I've lost a beautiful feeling, my focus is not on leaving my thinking alone. My focus is on getting present.
Mm.
Now, in getting present, I am leaving my thinking alone, but leaving my thinking alone is not another thing to do so I can get present.
Yeah.
My only goal is to get present. Now, however I get present is the way I am guided in that moment to get present.
Mm.
And I've got stories where one time I was late to a radio interview, and because I got lost thought I knew the town. It was my hometown, but I'd been anyway. And when I got there, I was 10 minutes late for the interview, and the radio guy was angry. I was pissed off at myself. It was not, but this was 1983. But I said, wait, I've got a choice here. Let me get present.
Yeah.
Let me and within 3 minutes, we were both in a beautiful state of mind, and we had a 47-minute incredible interview.
Mm.
If I would have stayed in there trying to get out of my head, trying to leave my thoughts alone, no, 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 no. Let me just get present as best as I can. Let me make it simple.
Yeah.
Let me just get as best as I can. Am I going to have judgments? You're not doing so well. Dan would be doing better than you at this stage. No, I don't care. I do the best that I can. Maya Angelou, that beautiful African American poet who died a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago, she said, if people could see that everybody is doing the best they can, given what they know, Always. Even people that, it doesn't mean that you condone the behavior that's hurtful to people, but you can still love the person. The last page of Sydney Banks's Missing Link, he says, he says, "Lo- d- forgive those who trespass against you, for they have lost their way.
Mm.
Forgive those who have sinned against you, for they have lost their way. Bless those, not forgive. Bless those who have sinned against you, for they have lost their way."
Yeah.
You know, whether you're Christian or not, I think people appreciate, here's Jesus Christ allegedly asphyxiating, dying, and saying, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And Maya Angelou's version was, if people could realize that they themselves and other people have always done the best that they've been felt capable of doing at that moment until they know better. And once they know better, then they do better.
Yeah.
I recently stopped doing a clinic because of funding changes in the United States. And there were people that had been addicted to heroin and narcotics, and they're on Suboxone. And some of them, we would, at the end of our session, we would read 6 pages from the Missing Link. And they started to forgive themselves for those 20 years of addiction. They started to forgive themselves. And you know what happened as they forgave themselves, Daniel? They said, my irritable bowel syndrome has not acted up in the last 3 months. Another would say, I haven't had a migraine headache in over 3 months, and I used to have them 3 times a week. I haven't had this bruxism where I grind my teeth. I realize I haven't had that in 6 weeks. And they boom, 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 because they were starting to, all those symptoms before were love letters
Yeah.
trying to get their attention to summon them, just like the rumble strip on the side of the road, that when you're about to go into the ditch and flip over, the rumble strip hits you and it wakes you up.
Yeah.
That rumble strip is your love letter. It's not your enemy.
Mm.
It's getting you back in, it's getting you back home to
Yeah.
the present.
I want to ask Bill what your experience were like in, because I know you did some work with Steve Addison,
Hmm.
and what was that like? Because I know I can't remember if it was around about the same time as, the Leeds trip, because I did hear Linda at some point saying that, or it might have been on a talk that she just said that she listened to him and she needed to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it was probably a year later. And, I had 26 years of personal mentoring by Sydney Banks. So many people like yourself. I mean, I feel fortunate that there's very few of us, and we're going to be gone in a few years, that ever even knew Sydney Banks in person, right?
Mm.
Um, but I was fortunate enough to that. But tell me the question. Oh, Steve Hardison. So I had 10 hours with Steve Hardison. I had 26 years with Sid. Now, as you know, I've gotten, I don't know if you blackballed, maybe a pretty strong word, but by some people, I've not been allowed to speak at Three Principles events because I saw some value in meeting with Steve Hardison, who has become a dear friend of mine,
Mm.
and as he's just one of the most loving, generous people that I often, when I want to say Steve, I say Sid, and when I want to say Sid, I say Steve.
Yeah.
That says something about where they are in my heart. So what did that 10 hours? That 10 hours deepened my understanding of things that I had been exploring for 42 years with Sid, as best as I could.
Mm.
I saw psychological innocence at a whole new level. I saw a healthy love of myself as not only not optional if I want to give and receive love freely, but as essential.
Mm.
And I think most of us, I grew up thinking that self-love was pride, it was not good. No, a healthy love of self, and I think a healthy love of self is impossible or very difficult if you haven't seen psychological innocence. Same as forgiveness. So many wise people have talked through the ages of the power of forgiveness. If you really understand psychological innocence, if you really, I mean, Jesus is a clear example. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. To the degree that you do that, you don't condone, as Sid makes the difference in there, you don't condone the behavior, but you have compassion for the person, for their ignorance and their lostness.
Mm.
And your heart goes out to them. You feel love. It doesn't mean that you think it's right to be killing little babies or whatever they do, but your heart goes out to them. And that's why there's nobody that I can't see. I don't care what they've done, whether they're in prison or I know the feeling of being lost. I
Mm.
know that feeling. And when people are really lost and their life starts to lose meaning, other people's lives lose meaning too.
Yeah.
So I guess what I forget what the question was.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just asking you, you've kind of answered it there. I just wanted to see what it were like for you to have that experience with Steve because that it's someone new that I've recently come across and um yeah, it must have been quite a special thing to do.
It was a powerful thing, and people I got in trouble with a lot of people when I only had 30 minutes in Prague. I tried to explain. I'm going to read you what's called a document. I don't call it a document. To me, it's not a airy fairy. It's not a wish. It's what I see glimpses of, like Sue says in here. I start to realize that I am the creative energy of life.
Yeah.
These are things that I've started to see, and that I forget sometimes when I get caught up in my thinking. So I read my document some people, oh, you shouldn't need any tools. Well, they misunderstand. I spent 26 years with Sid, and he was in his right mind about 98% of the time. But about 2% of the time, and he on a good day, he would admit, I get out of my right mind. And a lot of times people quote him from 2% of the time that he wasn't in his right mind. And so he would say, as he says on the next to the last page of his book, people don't, there are many ways to find the inner wisdom that will lead you to a healthier state of mind. This is on page 141. You must exercise your freedom of choice to decide your own individual path. No matter which path you take, the wisdom you seek will always be found within the depths of your own consciousness. He doesn't say, remember, you better know the three principles and not listen to anybody that talks about anything else, or else you're an infidel. No, no, that isn't what he says.
Yeah.
And so in listening, I was moved in a moment of where I felt old. I felt kind of like I was stuck. Even after 42 years, I was stuck. Now I was stuck at a level way beyond where I was 42 years ago, but I was stuck. And I got quiet enough to say, and I won't go into the finances of I can't afford that, but I did. I was moved to do it. I, I've been reimbursed in my heart and in every way, multiples of
Yeah.
what my investment was.
Yeah.
Because it allowed me to see, and this is what people don't hear. Sid Banks is pointing. He said, don't listen. My words are a finger. There's a lot of people pointing to the spiritual truth. Now, I think the principles are as good, if not as better, than anybody else's metaphor. But if you start arguing about the fingers, who's got the best finger, you're missing the fact that they're all pointing to the same spiritual truth.
Yeah.
And what's important is the spiritual truth that we are divine energy in a form, and that's what we are at our essence, and that will still be standing when our brain and our body fall away. I love the metaphor of when we are born, there's a very tall tree, and we're connected to that universal consciousness. And when we're born, we break free from that tree and we start floating for 70 years, 80 years. And then when we hit the ground, we go back to the tree again. We go back to where we came from. Well, that's what life is. In this brain body, we're driving a car. When we don't need the car anymore, the car falls away and we're still standing. That's who we are. What's still standing when the body and the brain have fallen away.
Yeah.
This article will point out that we either think that consciousness somehow comes from the brain or it's what manifests and creates the brain. That's what Sid's saying.
Yeah.
That the individual side of consciousness is the soul, the universal side of consciousness is what we call God.
Mm.
That's a direct quote.
Yeah. I think I remember hearing another quote by Sid. It was or he said on a tape of to raise your level of consciousness is to raise your level of understanding. And then kind of said they're all the same thing. Um, but again, that kind of sounds to the listeners as potentially something I need to do something to understand, looking out.
If you think of understanding as something that you do intellectually, then you're screwed.
Mm,
And he makes it so clear. If people really, that's why I encourage people read all six of Sid's books
mm,
at least twice through before you read anybody else's books. If you were a young physicist who wanted to know about relativity, you would read Einstein's three 1905 papers a, many times before you read second, third, and fourth generation physicists. Okay?
mm,
And people don't do that, and then they misunderstand it. But if they've read Sid's books at least twice, they'll start to get a glimpse of what he's talking about.
yeah.
And what was it? There's a point that you just made. What? Oh, so he says in it, he says, listen, it's okay to want to see more. That's understanding. But if you try to see more with your intellect, you're not going to see more.
Mm,
You're just going to get yourself more confused. So if you want to see more, here is the foolproof way to see more. It's to be grateful for what you've seen and what you have.
yeah.
And then he says the feeling that comes from being filled with gratitude for what you embracing the now, where you are and what you have and what you've seen, not what you've lost and what you haven't seen, but being grateful, that feeling 100% of the time will carry you forward to see more. Again, it goes back to what we talked about, Daniel. If you don't understand the system, you're going to hurt yourself with the system.
Mm,
So if you get to where I want to see more, I'm going to figure it out. Woody Allen, when he woke up after being asleep for 25 years in the movie The Sleeper, he said, 25 years. Hell, I could have been halfway through my analysis. It's real simple. People say, how do you know whether to keep trying to figure something out or not? I said, if after 2 minutes you're feeling better and you're feeling more relaxed and more peaceful, keep doing it.
yeah.
If after 2 minutes you're not, get yourself into the present as best as you can. Whether that means folding clothes, petting your dog, taking a walk, or just sitting quietly, enjoying hearing the sound of the birds and you know, whatever.
Mm,
Anything that allows you to get present.
yeah. I think as we're coming to the end, Bill, I just wanted to ask if there was one simple thing that you could wish for people to see, what would it be?
Same thing I'd wish for myself, that I come to a greater realization that I'm not separate from that which I seek, that I'm a manifestation of that and so are you, and everything that I see. As David Bohm says, there's a wholeness that nothing is there. There's no, there can't be a devil fighting the God. There can't be anything separate. Everything is everything. And that's what Sid said. I think Sid and David Bohm and these quantum physicists would have wonderful lunches because they just use different words.
Yeah.
Sid said the formless and the form, the great nothingness and the great isness together is the allness. David Bohm says the implicate order and then the explicate order, and together they're the wholeness. Nothing can be separate.
Yeah.
If people, so to go back, summarize, if people in it, to the degree that I see, and I think of it as this way, you know how if you use a font, it can be size 12 or it can be 16 or 20. Knowing that you are what you seek, that you're, Sid says, little divine, little deities running around trying to figure out what you are. If you, and to some people that's sacrilegious, but if you see that you are a manifestation, you're a wave of the ocean, which is God, you're a manifestation of that, fear dissolves into, there's no fear, there's nothing to fear because you know your true identity.
Mm.
And again, there's a difference between 2080 and 80/20. The key is to get going in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Bill, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to share on the bio and on social media, if it's all right with you, your trip to the UK and the dates. I'd like to share those with others.
Okay. Okay.
If you could share them with me, that'd be great.
Oh, sure. I can. I'll do that along with the Maria Strum's article.
Yeah.
Huh? And would you like this? The Patsy.
Yeah,
You know
that
the
that'd be
yeah.
great. Yeah, I'd love to have a
Okay.
look at that.
So article Patsy and what did we just say? There was something else. The second thing.
Oh, the dates of your trip.
Oh, dates of trip. Yeah, dates of transatlantic. Yeah, of transatlantic. Okay. Okay. And here's the deal. I did a course, a 32-hour course. Have I mentioned this to you, the Witnessing Miracles? I did a 32-hour course of 32 hours, which is a chronicle of my 42 years of, I would send it to you for free, the 32 hours. Have I sent it to you yet?
No, I think you asked someone to do it. I've not received it yet, but that would
Okay.
be yeah that
Okay, I will, and then you can share that as you know, to me, at this stage of the game, I'm trusting that I'll have enough. And if I don't, it's not about making money to me. Do I need to keep paying my bills? Would I like to be able to keep the house? Yes. But my goal is to share I've been blessed to see and to spend 26 years with this man that I want to do whatever I can to bring more peace to the world, period. And it starts the more people that are at peace, then there'll be more peace in the world.
yeah. Thank
So
you so
uh,
much, Bill. That'd be
you're
lovely.
very, very welcome.